So I want you to imagine the person that you trust most in the world with your physical safety.
Like your ultimate safety net.
Exactly.
Hmm.
They carry a black bag, maybe wear a stethoscope around their neck,
Mm-hmm.
and, they make house calls when you're at your absolute most vulnerable.
Right, right.
When they walk into the room, your blood pressure just kind of drops. You breathe this huge sigh of relief.
Yeah.
You gladly hand over your complete trust because, the underlying social contract is that this person has dedicated their entire life to healing you.
Yeah, and that dynamic is completely foundational. I mean, the whole medical profession relies on our willingness to just surrender our defenses, to allow another human being to make literal life or death decisions on our behalf.
But today we're doing a deep dive into a story where that ultimate symbol of safety was actually just, well, it was a perfectly constructed camouflage.
It's deeply unsettling.
It really is. Today's mission is to unpack the chilling life and crimes of Dr. Harold Shipman. We're going to look through the historical records, the medical logs, the criminal proceedings we have today to understand how a trusted local general practitioner
A pillar of his community, really.
completely,
Yeah.
how he operated as the most prolific serial killer in modern British history.
Yeah.
We're talking about an estimated 250 victims over a 30-year period.
Just an unfathomable number.
Right. These were people who called him to their homes for help and who were instead given an execution.
Hmm.
Okay, let's unpack this. Where does a pathology like this even begin?
Well, to understand the genesis of all this, we really have to look at a very specific, deeply formative event in his youth, because the blueprint for his entire grim methodology was drafted when he was just 17 years old.
Wow, that early.
Yeah. So Shipman was born in 1946, and he grew up in this working-class, devoutly Methodist family in Nottingham, and he was unusually close to his mother, Vera.
Okay.
But then in 1963, Vera was diagnosed with terminal lung cancer.
Which, that's a devastating diagnosis now, but especially given the palliative care options back in the early 1960s.
Precisely. It was incredibly bleak. As the disease progressed into its final stages, she was cared for at home. And a local doctor would routinely visit the house to administer morphine to just sort of ease her suffering.
Right.
And young Harold stood there in the bedroom and watched the sequence play out repeatedly. He watched the doctor arrive with this unquestioned authority,
Just walked right in.
Exactly. He watched the preparation of the syringe, the injection, and then the immediate, profound physiological response as his mother's agonizing pain subsided. I mean, he witnessed this dynamic of absolute control and relief right up until her death.
Looking at what he went on to do decades later, that childhood scene acts as this, like, a twisted mirror image.
Oh, absolutely.
He took the ultimate act of medical mercy, easing a terminal patient's pain just like he saw with his mother, and he completely inverted it. He turned it into this act of supreme, godlike control over healthy, unsuspecting victims.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. Control.
Because he specifically targeted vulnerable, elderly people, mostly women, who trusted him implicitly.
Yeah.
And his weapon of choice was diamorphine, which is basically the medical term for pharmaceutical heroin.
What's fascinating here is how that traumatic childhood experience didn't just give him, like, a biological weapon. It provided a complete psychological script.
A script?
Yeah, I mean, he wasn't simply murdering these people. He was acting out this highly controlled theatrical production over and over again. You see, diamorphine is a central nervous system depressant. In lethal doses, it causes profound respiratory depression. So the patient simply stops breathing.
Just fades away.
Right. Shipman would visit them in their living rooms, administer the fatal dose under the guise of taking blood or giving a vitamin shot, and then he would literally just sit there and watch the life drain out of them.
So chilling.
And afterward, he utilized his authority as a doctor to sign their death certificates himself, usually citing old age or maybe a sudden coronary event.
But wait, if he's listing natural causes on the official paperwork for patients who were perfectly mobile and healthy just days prior,
Yeah.
how is he bridging that logical gap? Like, if another doctor or a family member asks questions, how is he not getting caught immediately?
Well, he bridged it by building a fake architectural blueprint of their failing health. So back in the 1990s, medical records were moving from paper files to local computer systems in the doctor's surgery.
Oh, right, the early digital age.
Exactly. And Shipman meticulously weaponized this new technology. After a patient was dead, he would go back into his local microdoc computer system and retroactively alter their medical history.
No way.
Oh, yeah. He'd insert fabricated notes dated weeks or maybe months earlier, claiming the patient had been complaining of chest pains or, showing signs of a deteriorating heart condition.
So he's planting evidence.
He essentially manufactured a clinical trail of evidence that led directly to the natural cause of death he had literally just written on their certificate.
That level of premeditation, I mean, it fundamentally shifts the perspective from just a crime of opportunity to this industrial scale operation.
It really was.
Which forces us to look at the environment surrounding him. Because if he was operating at this scale for nearly 3 decades, what were the systemic blind spots that allowed him to continue unchecked for so long?
Well, the blind spots were massive, and the most glaring one occurred right at the beginning of his career, actually.
Really?
Yeah, 1975. While he was working as a GP in Todmorden, Shipman was actually caught forging prescriptions for pethidine, which is a synthetic opioid.
Wait, he was caught forging prescriptions back in the 70s?
He was. However, he wasn't doing it to kill patients back then. He was actually feeding his own severe drug addiction. The authorities discovered the fraud. He was fined £600, and he was sent to a brief stint in a drug rehab clinic.
But a doctor caught actively defrauding the system to obtain heavy narcotics, I mean, usually that person faces permanent career consequences, right?
In many systems, yeah, absolutely. But the General Medical Council allowed him to keep his medical license.
You're kidding.
No, he just continued practicing. He eventually established his own independent, highly successful surgery on Market Street in Hyde by 1993.
So he just bounced back?
Pretty much. And this lack of permanent consequence for his first major transgression seemingly emboldened him. But the red flags, they definitely didn't stop there. By March of 1998, a neighboring doctor in Hyde, Dr. Linda Reynolds, actually recognized a horrifying pattern.
Okay, so someone finally noticed.
Yeah. She approached the local coroner to explicitly express her concerns about the abnormally high mortality rate among Shipman's patients.
Did she have specific data, or was it just kind of a general sense of unease?
Oh, she had a very specific administrative anomaly to point to. It was the cremation forms.
The cremation forms.
Right. So in the UK, to authorize a cremation, a secondary doctor is supposed to review the paperwork and countersign it, just to ensure there are no suspicious circumstances.
Ah, a built-in check and balance.
Exactly. And Dr. Reynolds pointed out the sheer volume of cremation forms Shipman was asking his colleagues to countersign. And they were overwhelmingly for elderly women who had died quite suddenly.
Wow. Okay, that completely reframes the narrative that nobody noticed. I mean, a fellow medical professional officially blew the whistle.
She did. And the Greater Manchester Police actually opened an investigation. But they closed it just a few weeks later in April 1998. They cited insufficient evidence. And the thing is, it wasn't just doctors who saw the pattern either.
Rules.
A local taxi driver named John Shaw, he went to the police later that summer. Shaw regularly drove these elderly women to the hospital or just on errands. And he noticed that vibrant, perfectly healthy women he had just driven were suddenly dropping dead within hours of a home visit from Dr. Shipman.
Oh, my God.
Shaw actually told the police he suspected Shipman had murdered over 20 patients.
And the police did what?
Yet again, no action was taken. And Shipman felt so incredibly secure that he killed 3 more people after that initial police investigation was dropped.
Okay, I have to push back on the official narrative here. The subsequent public inquiry blamed this devastating failure on, quote, inexperienced officers being assigned to a complex medical case. But is that really the whole truth?
It's a highly debated point.
I mean, was it purely a lack of detective skills? Or are we looking at a much deeper societal blindness here? Like, do we have such an ingrained subconscious deference to the white coat that even seasoned police officers literally could not process the idea that a mild-mannered community doctor was a serial killer?
This raises an important question, really, and it strikes at the absolute core of why Shipman was able to operate in plain sight. We are culturally programmed to view doctors as benevolent authority figures.
They are the healers.
Exactly. They hold a specialized knowledge that we just don't possess. So when a doctor confidently asserts, oh, her heart just gave out, the institutional impulse is to process the paperwork. It's not to treat the doctor as a murder suspect.
It's trust by default.
Totally. Shipman used that inherent trust as a sort of localized anesthetic for the authorities. The police weren't interrogating a killer, they were awkwardly questioning a respected physician, and they just deferred to his expertise.
Meanwhile, the mathematical data was practically screaming that a crime was occurring.
The mathematics are perhaps the most tragic element of this whole oversight, because in 2003, a leading statistician named David Spiegelhalter applied statistical modeling to Shipman's patient mortality rates.
What did you find?
Well, he used this thing called a sequential probability ratio test. Basically, it compares a specific doctor's patient deaths against the baseline average mortality rate for that exact demographic in the wider area.
Okay.
And Spiegelhalter's paper proved that if basic statistical monitoring had been utilized, an undeniable mathematical alarm would have sounded as early as the end of 1996.
1996.
Yeah. The threshold for statistical significance was crossed at 67 excess deaths. By the time the police botched that first investigation in 1998, Shipman had accumulated 119 excess deaths.
That is just heartbreaking. So the failure of the authorities, both medical and legal, basically provided him with this impenetrable shield. He must have felt completely invincible,
Without a doubt.
which sets the stage for his final fatal mistake. Because it wasn't a brilliant forensic breakthrough that caught him, right? It was his own staggering, unchecked hubris.
Yeah, we finally arrive at June 24th, 1998. Shipman's final victim was an 81-year-old woman named Kathleen Grundy, and she was a prominent, highly active figure. She was actually a former mayoress of Hyde.
Not exactly someone who would slip under the radar.
No, not at all. Shipman was the last person to see her alive during a routine home visit, and per his usual protocol, he certified her death, recorded the cause as old age, and just left the house.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because Kathleen Grundy's daughter, Angela Woodruff, was a solicitor. She was a highly trained lawyer.
A very crucial detail.
And shortly after her mother's death, Angela receives a call from another local solicitor who says a new will has surfaced. A will allegedly made by Kathleen just before she died. And this new document entirely disinherits Angela and her children.
Just completely cuts them out.
Completely. Instead, it leaves her mother's entire estate, which was valued at £386,000, entirely to Dr. Harold Shipman.
It's important to understand the mechanics of why this specific document immediately unraveled his entire life's work.
Right, because legal documents have rules.
Exactly. A legitimate last will and testament relies on very specific legal formatting. This includes an attestation clause, which formally dictates how the witnesses observed the signing.
Right.
And Angela Woodruff looked at this document and instantly saw it was a clumsy, amateurish forgery. I mean, it was poorly typed, the legal phrasing was completely unnatural.
And what about the witnesses?
Well, the signatures of the witnesses were real, but it turned out Shipman had tricked two of his other patients into signing the paper, just claiming they were witnessing a routine medical document.
Okay, I have a question here. For a man who spent 30 years being so meticulous, right? Someone who built complex digital blueprints of fake medical histories to cover his tracks, how does he make such an amateur cartoonish error?
It's baffling.
He leaves himself hundreds of thousands of pounds on a badly typed piece of paper and hands it to a lawyer. Was it pure arrogance, or was there some psychological, subconscious desire to be stopped because his life was spiraling?
You know, this is actually one of the most heavily debated aspects of his psychology. Some investigative journalists who studied the case proposed that theory, that he subconsciously wanted to be apprehended, that the sheer volume of his crimes was just overwhelming him.
Makes sense, in a way.
It does. However, the alternative theory is far more chilling and arguably a lot more likely.
Which is?
He simply believed he was smarter than everyone else. After 30 years of showing absolute contempt for the intelligence of the police, the medical boards, and the families of his victims, he likely just assumed his white coat shield would protect him even from blatant, easily provable financial fraud.
He thought he was untouchable.
He really thought he could retire at 55 on Kathleen Grundy's money and just walk away untouched.
But Kathleen Grundy wasn't cremated. She was buried. And because Angela Woodruff triggered a rigorous police investigation through her legal connections, the police actually exhumed Grundy's body. Toxicology reports came back, and there it was. Lethal, undeniable traces of dimorphine in her tissue.
And when the police executed a search warrant on Shipman's home, they found the mechanical proof. A Brother typewriter.
Wow.
The exact make and model used to type the forged will. The forensic linguistics completely matched his typing style. This single instance of financial greed gave the authorities the thread they finally needed.
And once they started pulling.
Exactly. Once they had him for the murder of Kathleen Grundy, they began pulling the thread on the hundreds of other death certificates he had signed.
And that's when the computer forensics finally caught up with him, too.
Yes, exactly. When investigators seized the microdot computer system from his surgery, they didn't just look at the dates he typed on his patient notes, they looked at the internal system timestamps.
The metadata.
Right. The computer's hard drive automatically recorded exactly when a file was altered. And the forensic experts proved that Shipman was logging in hours after a patient had died and creating these retroactive entries complaining of chest pains.
So his digital footprint betrayed him.
The digital footprint was incontrovertible.
In October 1999, at Preston Crown Court, Shipman was officially charged with the murders of 15 women, which represented just a tiny specimen of his overall victim count. He sat through the trial, faced with the toxicology reports, the computer forensics, the typewriter, and he completely denied his guilt.
He gave them absolutely nothing.
No explanation, no apology, just a wall of silence.
Yeah, and in January 2000, it took the jury only 6 days to find him guilty of 15 counts of murder and 1 count of forgery. The judge sentenced him to life in prison with a whole life tariff, ensuring he would never, ever be released. And of course, he was officially struck off the medical register. But Shipman's compulsion for control dictated even his final act.
How so?
On January 13, 2004, the day before his 58th birthday, he hanged himself in his cell at HM Prison, Wakefield.
And even that timing, being the day before his birthday, that was a calculated mechanical decision.
It was entirely financially motivated. By committing suicide before his 60th birthday, Shipman exploited a loophole, ensuring that his wife, Primrose, would receive his full National Health Service pension payout, which was estimated at around £100,000.
Unbelievable.
If he had lived past 60, or if the authorities had time to officially strip the pension through further legal proceedings, she would have received nothing. There were also credible reports that Primrose, who had steadfastly defended him for years, was finally starting to demand he tell her the truth.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So his suicide silenced her demands, it secured the financial payout, and it allowed him to exit the narrative entirely on his own terms.
So what does this all mean? I mean, the families of the victims were left without a confession, without the closure of hearing why he took their loved ones. But while the man opted out, the institutional shockwave of what he did fundamentally altered the infrastructure of British society.
It really did. The government launched the Shipman Inquiry, chaired by Judge Janet Smith. That 2-year investigation officially estimated his victim count at around 250 people.
250 people.
And the mechanics of the UK medical system were forced to undergo a massive overhaul. The cremation process, which Shipman had so easily bypassed, was completely restructured.
Right, the forms.
Yes. New documentation, specifically Form 4 and Form 5, required explicit, detailed answers about the circumstances of death. And the secondary doctor could no longer simply rubber stamp the paperwork. They had to actively investigate the primary doctor's findings.
But the, quote, Shipman effect, it wasn't just administrative red tape. It bled directly into patient care, creating this terrifying paradox.
It created a severe chilling effect on palliative medicine. Because Shipman had so effectively weaponized diamorphine, doctors across the UK became terrified of being accused of overprescribing pain medication to the elderly.
They didn't want to look like him.
Exactly. They feared looking like the next Harold Shipman. This widespread anxiety led to a documented underprescribing of necessary palliative drugs.
That's awful.
It meant terminally ill patients were left to suffer unnecessary pain because the medical community was paralyzed by the shadow of his crimes. If we connect this to the bigger picture, Harold Shipman remains the only British doctor ever convicted of murdering his patients. There have been other healthcare serial killers, sure, like nurses operating in busy hospital wards where the responsibility is sort of diffused among a large staff.
Right, it's easier to hide in a crowd.
But Shipman was the trusted local GP. He made house calls, he sat in people's living rooms, drank their tea, and used their absolute trust as a weapon. He permanently shattered the paternalistic bond between a community and its doctor.
We've traced the timeline of a man who took the profound trauma of his mother's agonizing death and somehow metabolized it into a lifelong compulsion for control. We explored how he manipulated the fundamental trust of the medical profession, how he exploited the technological blind spots of early computer databases, and how it took the sheer, unadulterated hubris of a forged will on a brother typewriter to finally bring down the most prolific serial killer in modern history.
It's a heavy history to process.
It really is. But as we wrap up this deep dive, there's one final thought I want you to mull over. We discussed the Shipman effect and how the immediate medical reaction was to underprescribe pain medication out of fear. It makes you wonder, In our desperate reactive rush to build massive administrative walls, to create endless layers of red tape designed to catch the extremely rare monsters hiding in positions of trust, how many completely innocent people inadvertently suffer from the friction of that very same system?
It's a tragic paradox.
We started this journey talking about the relief of handing over your trust to the person in the white coat. And the complex truth is, we have no choice but to do so. You cannot be healed without making yourself vulnerable. The question we're continually left grappling with is, how do we balance giving experts the authority they need to care for us without handing them the keys to our absolute destruction? Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the systems around you, and we'll see you next time.